Here's a scenario to consider. A child falls off a swing set at a playground, municipal playground. The mother sues the city for her child's injuries. The city racks up a legal bill defending itself, or maybe even settles, and that means that the taxpayers have to pay. Lawsuits are draining municipal budgets. Trial lawyers are accused of being part of the problem. This is a group that just recently announced support for a pay increase for New York State lawmakers, ironically. Joining us tonight to talk more about this, we have Walter Olson, he's from the Cato Institute, and Tom Stebbins from the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Gentlemen, welcome to Capitol Tonight.
Good to be here.
Welcome back to Capitol Tonight, I should say. So Mr. Olson, also we should note you are in town to keynote, is that correct? You are participating in the conference of this organization, this fine organization. Is this the topic on which you will be opining?
I'll be talking more broadly about the litigation problem, why New York is different from other states, why other states gradually get around to fixing their problems with litigation, and New York never seems to fix it.
Right. Well, Tom and I have had countless conversations about that very topic.
Yes, indeed.
So this is interesting, because there's been a report lately, it's Governing Magazine, if I'm not mistaken, which looked at or asked, I'm surprised that a bunch of municipalities actually just ponied up this information, but asked big cities for their settlement and defending costs, and they found, not surprisingly, that those costs are quite high, and New York City sort of tops the list.
New York doesn't just top the list, it is as high as the next 19 cities combined. So we're at about 720 million, and the next 19 cities in the survey do not add up to that.
Okay, but
so
this is New York City that we're talking about,
but
right?
there are other big cities in this country.
Yes, no, I understand.
Chicago,
I'm just
there's
saying.
Los Angeles.
No, I know. I'm just saying.
If you were to do this on a per capita basis, it's still not close.
Right.
It's still clear that there is a major problem going on in New York.
But before we get any further in delving into what's going on in New York City, is it also a problem in Buffalo and Syracuse and Rochester, which are not addressed in the, I mean, I'm saying smaller municipalities, do they also have this problem?
Sure. I mean, we still see a lot of cases. Gloversville, for example, has massive problems with litigation. So many New York municipalities have these problems, have these costs. And the reason for that is a lot of the laws that you and I have talked about many times on this air that make it easy to sue municipalities and, more importantly, easy to collect from municipalities. And we all pay for that.
So, Mr. Olson, what is it that's different about New York? I mean, other states, you say, are getting around to fixing the problem, or at least trying?
Most states have passed some sort of tort reform, but in the case of suits against municipalities, a lot of them already had, to begin with, laws that protected municipalities from being sued. Sometimes it would limit damages, sometimes it would assign those cases to a court of claims where the procedures are a little more predictable and the dollar amounts are usually more predictable. The methods differ, but they help explain why other cities around the country just don't face anything like the New York problem.
So is it also your opinion that it is the trial lawyers who are largely blocking? I mean, there are various different proposals that are sort of pending in various stages at the legislature that could address this problem.
The trial lawyer's role in New York is very special. There are only a few other states where they are anywhere near as politically powerful as in New York. And year after year, and this is a problem that, of course, dates way back, you find that mayor after mayor, Mayor Dinkins, Mayor Giuliani, Mayor Bloomberg, all went to Albany with similar sorts of numbers, saying, now will you help us? And none of them got anywhere at all because of that special political situation.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, even the city council has tried to do things. So there was a situation a long time ago where the city was often liable for just slip and falls. And so they passed a law that says we need to know if there is a deficiency before we can fix it.
Right.
And so the trial lawyers created something that still exists today called the Big Apple Sidewalk Safety Commission. That's a database that says you've been served with 900,000 deficiencies on New York sidewalks, and now we can sue you anytime we want.
And they pay people to go around and chronicle the various different deficiencies.
Correct.
I mean, there's a couple of ways also that New York City is trying to address this problem. And Mayor de Blasio is, for example, they've hired a slew of lawyers. I mean, one of the problems is that a lot of cities, because they don't want to have the defense costs, they just settle.
Right.
And also you have a lot of high-profile cases, particularly in this era of law enforcement difficulties, right? Police brutality cases. Those tend to be the biggest payouts theft, generally speaking. And sometimes you don't want to go to court with those because the publicity is terrible.
Sure.
And so you just settle. And I think that Mayor Bloomberg has suggested that, Mayor de Blasio has suggested that no more. And if you actually demonstrate that you're willing to fight, you send a message that maybe it's not so great. It's not like a big, piggy bank that you should, every time you stub your toe, bring a lawsuit against a city. But not every municipality can afford that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of this is based on Chicago, where there was a report that was done called Chicago, the City That Settles. And they were paying just as much as New York City was at that time on a per capita basis. This was in the 90s. And so Chicago decided we're going to take a tougher approach. We're not going to settle every case. We're going to take some of these to trial. We're going to take as many as we can to trial. And their costs went up in the short term. But the long term, their costs went down, and now, as we've seen with 19 other cities, they're still not to where New York is combined.
But would you recommend that for like a Gloversville or a smaller municipality? I mean, that doesn't seem like a cost-effective way to address the problem.
And it's true. If your volume of cases is such that you're only dealing with a few, then that short-term increase in cost or rolling the dice and going to trial, because for New York City, they are averaging out hundreds of potential trials. For Gloversville, they have to be worth it. There are municipalities here and there around the country where there has been a single injury case that has sent the municipality into bankruptcy. That's not going to happen to New York with an injury. It might happen to a small town.
So you're pushing again, and we were hopeful that the change in leadership, or you were hopeful that the change in leadership at the Assembly, particularly the Democrats, because Sheldon Silver, the Speaker, who of course was found guilty of corruption charges and was ousted as a result.
Walter has written about several times.
Well, I mean, you thought that maybe that change, because he was a lawyer himself and he was close to the trial lawyers, would move things along in Albany, but that's not the case. Now we're seeing, at least at the federal level, a massive sea change in politics, but in Albany it doesn't look like we're going to see a significant change whatsoever.
Well, what we are seeing, and what we did see with this election, is specifically with the Senate Republicans, is that they're going to likely maintain their control. But one of the key races that they didn't win was down in Long Island, the case with Chris McGrath and Todd Kaminsky.
Right.
And Chris McGrath was a Republican who is a personal injury trial lawyer. And the Republicans put him up, and he was one of the first to be defeated. So I think this sends a clear message. Is that what you think
it was? You think that was because he was a trial lawyer?
I absolutely think that's what it was. I mean, I think what it tells people, and tells the Senate Republicans specifically, is that the trial lawyer agenda is not something that people are going to vote for. And I think that's a big part of the reason why he didn't win.
So before I let you go, and we're running out of time, but Mr. Olson, I'm curious, this particular article in Governing also has some very interesting suggestions that perhaps you reduce your liability at the outset by thinking long-term about the decisions that you make as a municipality. Like, for example, maybe you don't plant ginormous street trees that subsequently have roots that bulge up your sidewalk and cause a potential lawsuit where someone trips and falls. I mean, is that kind of farsightedness actually effective?
It certainly has a role. The problem is that it's kind of double-edged, because sometimes these are genuinely better safety practices. Sometimes it's simply a matter of, oh, let's not have ambitious or interesting trees. Let's have the same trees that every other town has and has found to be legally safer. And with trees, often it's a matter of branches falling off and beaning someone. But the more they plan for the long term, the more they are told by their lawyers or accountants, are you sure you want to have that recreational program that encourages people to go out hiking or sledding or whatever? And what you often get is a withdrawal of public services, an attempt to make them safe by making them smaller and less interesting.
Well, this is an ongoing conversation that I'm sure we will continue to have. I thank you, gentlemen, for being with me this evening. It is a pleasure to see both of you.